After a little while, the lamp exploded from the pressure, and the shards of glass that were launched from the lamp went straight into Philip, killing him.
What it is, guys, we're BlastphamousHD, and today we are here to check out embarrassing ways to die. If you guys want to watch the original video, links in the description down below. Let's do this.
It's certainly a morbid subject to discuss, but we've all likely talked to our friends about how we want to go out. No doubt for a lot of people, dying quietly in their sleep would seem like a good option, a kind of painless, non-messy exit, perhaps involving one last dream. Nobody wants to leave this planet slowly, wasting away in pain, or maybe even losing their minds. And while it might be fast, it's likely no one would like to go out in an extremely violent way. Then there's the ironic death, and there's plenty of those. We might recall the man in the US in the 80s who avoided the electric chair after a peel, then accidentally electrocuted himself in his cell and died. With that in mind, welcome to this episode of the Infographic Show, the strangest ways people have died. 13. The irony of dying while keeping fit. We'll give you just one famous example of a victim of irony, and that is the case of the former American jogging guru Jim Fixx. He wrote The Complete Book of Running in 1977, and it became a bestseller. In fact, he's said to be one of the main people that started what was called America's fitness revolution. Fixx had once been overweight and also a heavy smoker, but then he started his exercise regime, sold his books, and told the American people that running was the secret to having a long life and good health. He died of a heart attack while running when he was just 52 years old. Okay, so that's perhaps not so strange, and will get stranger, but we just wanted to give you an example of death by irony. 12. Death by clothing. You've all heard news media write stories about what it calls draconian laws or rules. This just usually means out-of-date laws or laws that seem way too strict or even brutal. We get this adjective from a Greek lawmaker called Draco. In Athens in the 7th century BC,
They had guns back then, and it was automatics. Young Draco's not gonna like this. I mean, but Soldier Boy, I think.
this man created laws that were said to be unfair, or at least unfair if you were not part of the wealthy group of people. His harsh legal code could mean cruel punishments for even petty crimes. Nonetheless, it said he was popular at the time with the crowds, but in those days, the public did seem to enjoy watching blood being spilled. It's said during one appearance in the Aeginetan Theater, the crowd wanted to show their adoration, so they threw their hats, cloaks, and shirts at him. But they went overboard, and it's said Draco suffocated under the avalanche of clothing from his admirers. We should say that this is an old story passed down, so one might question how it actually happened. Maybe they meant to kill him.
Would the clothes have bricks in them? How do you die by having clothing thrown at you?
But we'll never know what happened that fateful day. 11. Death by proving that something is safe.
What?
You may have heard about this one as it's popped up in various TV series from time to time. The story is of a Canadian lawyer called Gary Hoy. On July 9th, 1993, he was taking people on a tour of the Toronto Dominion Centre, a building of many floors with a lot of glass windows. He wanted to demonstrate to the people just how strong the windows were, as rightly some folks were concerned about such a high glass-fronted building. To do this, he did something he'd done before and threw himself at a glass window to show that the glass was very strong.
Very smart. It's like he's taste testing for danger, but with his body. Brilliant stuff.
He was right that the glass didn't smash, but on this occasion, the window popped out of its frame, and Hoy fell a long way to his death. An engineer later told the Canadian media, "I don't know of any building code in the world that would allow a 160-pound man to run up against a glass and withstand it." That might have been some shock for the bystanders. 10. Same but different. This is another story of a lawyer trying to prove a point to people and in doing so, killed himself. The man was an American lawyer called Clement Vallandigham, and in 1871 he was representing a client that was accused of murder. The lawyer was trying to prove that the victim wasn't murdered but had accidentally killed himself. He tried to show how this might have happened and accidentally shot himself. He died, but his client got off the murder charge. 9.
Wow.
Death by beard. A tourism website in Austria tells us that people can visit the epitaph of a man called Hans Steininger.
Was it onlyfans.com? We gonna edit that out.
He was a mayor of Braunau in the 16th century and was well known for having a really long beard. We're told it was so long that if not tied, it would trail on the floor. One day, the poor guy was walking down the street and he tripped on his own beard, broke his neck, and died. To this day, his beard is kept in the local museum. 8. Death by banana. Slipping on a banana skin is perhaps the best known gag joke. And
What was you driving a Mario Kart? How you slip and die off a banana peel?
Of course, it doesn't happen very often, but searching online we can find one death certificate from 1927 that did indeed blame a banana skin for the death of a man. The 74-year-old slipped and died in Tennessee. 7. Death by piano. If people do actually die from slipping on banana skins, do they also die by a piano falling on their heads? Well, someone actually investigated this, and that writer found at least one incident when a piano being pulled up a building had come crashing down on a person below. The website Straight Dope writes, in 1931 a piano was being hoisted up to a second-story window when a cornice broke free from the building, falling and killing a mover below. But perhaps the most famous piano death out there was that of a strip club bouncer called Jimmy Ferrozzo. In 1983, at a club in San Francisco, he and his girlfriend had been making love on a piano that was connected to a hoist so it could be lowered down for performances and raised when it wasn't being used. This time the piano was down on the floor, but during the act of passion, one of the two accidentally hit the switch and the piano was pulled up. Jimmy was consequently crushed against the ceiling, but we are told his lover survived the incident. 6. Killed by a bird. We can actually find a few instances of people being killed by birds.
Birds ain't shit. Birds ain't never been shit. They ain't never gonna be shit. Watch your back, men. They out here in full effect.
But this one has to be the strangest and also involves a fair bit of karma. In 2011, a 35-year-old California resident called Jose Luis Ochoa was stabbed to death by a bird. The BBC writes that the man had been at an illegal cockfight and had taken with him a cock that had sharp spurs on its legs, which were more like little knives. The bird apparently turned on its owner and he suffered what the coroner called a sharp force injury. A police spokesperson told the media, "I have never seen this type of an incident." No kidding. 5. Killing your son. The snake. In 2013, a Japanese man called Takuya Nagaya had apparently been acting a bit weird at his parents' apartment in Okazaki City. He'd been slithering around like a snake. Of course, his father came to the rational conclusion that his son had been possessed by some kind of snake demon. He then did the next rational thing and took matters into his own hands. Well, we should say head and teeth. Reports tell us his son died from injuries sustained while the father was trying to get the snake out of him by biting and headbutting him. You can only imagine what the scene must have looked like.
What?
4. A cow through the roof. The BBC reported in 2013 that a Brazilian man was killed in his bed when
The BBC, huh? Oh boy.
a cow came crashing down through his roof. Somehow the rather large animal got into his asbestos roof and fell right through it. Apparently this wasn't the first time a cow had fallen through a roof in this rural area. The 45-year-old died from internal bleeding. 3. Death by slug. Many of us might have done some silly things just because we were dared to do it, or we wanted to win some money or just show off. This goes wrong all the time, and you can find endless video clips of Darwin Award types of stunts online. In November 2018, the world's media reported the death of an Australian man called Sam Ballard, who had died aged 28. 8 years prior to his death, the skilled rugby player had been at a party with friends in Sydney. No doubt quite a bit of alcohol had been consumed, and during the party, a slug turned up on the scene. Ballard's friends, writes The Independent, dared him to eat the slug. That he did, but as a result, he became very sick. He was taken to a hospital, and it was found later that he had been infected by a parasite known as rat lungworm. This ended up paralyzing the young man and was the reason he died some years later. 2. Death by cockroach. You shouldn't eat slugs, and you also probably shouldn't eat cockroaches. The BBC tells us that in 2012, a man from Florida by the name of Edward Archbold had entered himself into a live cockroach eating competition. He had done well, devouring dozens of the creatures, but it also killed him. The coroner ruled that his death was caused by asphyxia due to choking and aspiration of gastric contents. In short, he had choked on cockroach body parts. 1. The body of Christ. We know that some Christians will take into their mouths something that symbolizes the body of Christ. But one Canadian man took this a step further in 1987. According to the Toronto Globe and Mail,
Did he eat the Holy Bible? That's what we call the Holy Bible in the streets. I really love the way it sounds because white people don't know what it means yet, and we only got about a good 3 more weeks until it gets out.
a man called Franco Brune had been taken in by police and left in the cells. It turns out that in the cell, the man had made use of a small Gideon's Bible by swallowing it. He choked to death on it. News reports tell us that for this mentally unwell man, the swallowing of the Bible to him was some form of symbolism or allegory, as though he was trying to purge himself of the devil by consuming religion. What's the strangest death you've heard about?
From picking up live grenades to getting electrocuted by a toilet and more. Here are 10 of some of the dumbest ways people have died. Number 10. Grenade selfie. There are certain things you're supposed to know not to mess with, and potentially dangerous explosives, well, they're one of those things. 2 men were traveling in Russia when they came across a live grenade. In this case, it was a grenade that just so happened to have the pin pulled out, which for those of you who don't know, that means the grenade is armed and could very easily explode. Obviously, the reason it wasn't already detonated was a fault in the system, which you might think means it was okay to pick up, and yet the opposite was true. That just made it even more dangerous. The 2 men didn't know that and decided it would be a great idea to pick up the grenade and then take a selfie with it. As you might expect, they didn't survive the experience. In fact, the grenade blew up mid-photo shoot. But rather ironically, while the men died, the phone somehow survived, and thus was used as evidence to show how the 2 men died. Usually that would be the end of this dumb cause of death, but
Bro, I'm trying to see the selfie they took, man. I want to see the picture.
here's the twist. This was just one case of selfies gone wrong to the extreme degree, because Russia had a slew of them that prompted the government to issue warnings about taking selfies with dangerous objects. A cool selfie could cost you your life, the Interior Minister warned in a new leaflet packed with tips, such as a selfie with a weapon kills. Yeah, it's true. A slew of Russian people were taking pictures with loaded weapons and other munitions because they thought it would make a great shot. And it turns out they were wrong. Very, very wrong. Number 9. Michael Goodwin. The case of Michael Goodwin is one of many layers. He was originally slated to be put to death, but then a change in his sentencing came in and he was given the punishment of life in prison. A change of good fortune, or at least it should have been. Living in his cell was fine, until one day he realized that the TV he had in it, due to good behavior, wasn't working. He examined it and eventually realized there was a bad wire. After taking stock of the situation and his own skill set, Goodwin felt the best option was to cut the wire with his teeth. And this was dumb on many levels, not the least of which was that due to it being a live wire, it was literally full of electricity, and thus he was electrocuted. But technically, that's not the end of the story, because there was a chance that the electrocution from the live wire wouldn't have killed him. But the repair work he was doing, he did via a metal toilet. So that amped up the power of the jolt that killed him. Ironically enough, though, Goodwin was supposed to be electrocuted before his change in sentence. His stupidity changed it back to the original verdict. How not to get away with bee murder. In 2002, a farmer in Brazil was going about his property and realized that there was a massive beehive there waiting for him. Bees can be very dangerous and potentially deadly depending on the species and a person's reaction to their painful stings. So thus caution was needed, and he did just that to an extent. To get rid of the bees, the man realized he needed to protect himself from the stings and then use fire to get rid of the hive, which in this case was a good 2-part plan, more or less. He went and prepared to burn the bees away. His idea of protecting himself was putting a plastic bag over his head and sealing it tight. And if you're already seeing the problem with this, then you'd be much smarter than this man. Not the least of which is a plastic bag wouldn't stop bee stings. But it gets worse, because he forgot about having to breathe. He didn't put holes in the bag so oxygen could get through, and thus he found himself suffocated by the tree where the bees were still very much alive. Number 7, backwards thinking. Driving is dangerous no matter what people like to think. There are many accidents on the roads of the world every single day, and things can happen when you don't think things through. Even an act as simple as parking. A certain 58-year-old woman from Australia, for example, forgot something rather important one day, to put her car in park, and it cost her big. So how did this happen? First and foremost, the reason she stopped the car on the way to the grocery store was because she wondered if she'd remembered the plastic bags in the trunk. Those plastic bags she used a lot thanks to a recycling mindset. So she responsibly pulled over, got out of the car, and checked the trunk. But this was the fatal mistake, because when she was doing this act, the car, which was not in park, started to roll backwards right when she was behind it, thus knocking her down and running her over, and the woman died. Not the way she expected the day would go, no doubt.
Get ran over by your own car. What type of traitorous shit is this?
Number 6, game over. There are many people who think that video games can have rather addictive properties, to the extent that some gamers will play the games they love for many hours on end. Now, there are parts of that can be very true, but usually these are very dedicated gamers and not the normal set. However, in South Korea, video gaming is a lifestyle, as one man named Lee tried not just to do, but to embody. During one session with the game StarCraft, he decided to play for 50 hours straight, without eating, without sleeping, without taking care of his body in general. The only breaks he took were to go to the bathroom when he really couldn't hold it anymore. If you can see the problem with this, then you know where this is going, because after playing for those 50 hours and not taking care of his body,
he shit on himself, deep and hard.
He died. Doctors cite that it was a mix of heart failure and exhaustion that caused his sudden death, both of which could have been easily prevented if he just went and did very basic things like sleep for even a few hours and get something to eat in the course of 10 to 15 minutes after every few hours. So thus he died trying to live a lifestyle that was literally unobtainable, a lesson for all of us for sure. Number 5. Lava lamp bomb. There are many ways to decorate rooms, but one that is very popular with people is lava lamps. That being said, there are rules to follow when first getting them and heating them up. Mainly do it slowly or else. Enter Philip, who did not want to follow this rule at all.
Who heats up a lava lamp in the first place?
Because he wanted to see his lava lamp in full flow. Being impatient, he decided to put the lamp on the stove and use its heat to make the lava lamp go. And it should be noted that doing this is in direct contradiction to the warnings on the label of the item. After a little while, the lamp exploded from the pressure, and the shards of glass that were launched from the lamp went straight into Philip, killing him. This story was so pervasive that Mythbusters actually tested the circumstances, and they found it could be done in the right situation, though Philip did prove that himself, tragically enough. Number 4. Did you hear something? The notion of things coming out of the sky to kill you is not new. However, something you wouldn't expect to be killed by without noticing it is a helicopter coming down on you.
Yeah.
Yet in British Columbia, a student in the area was indeed killed when a helicopter crashed into the ground and killed him. The obvious question that would need to be asked here is, why didn't he see or hear anything? The first answer is because he wasn't facing the correct direction apparently, which I guess makes sense. And the second part to that question is that the student had headphones on with the volume turned up real loud, which was later confirmed by an eyewitness. So thus, even when a massive piece of machinery was heading his way, he couldn't hear it. Thus, he got hit and died. The people in the helicopter died as well, and the whole incident was marked as very strange. Number 3. Clean sweep. In today's day and age, a chimney is not as standard in homes as they used to be in the past decades, mainly because modern advances in heating make them less useful, and they can be a bit of a pain to clean. And should you not clean them, you risk burning down your home. Enter Marco, who was a man with a chimney in his house. He started to clean his chimney in the basic way by using a broom, but he realized that it just wouldn't work. So he had a creative idea. Using a chain and a weight, he could have the broom go all the way through the chimney without much effort. All in all, kinda not a bad idea, but the weight aspect of this plan is where things got dumb, because he decided to use a grenade.
No.
But wait, there's more.
No.
Because not only was he using a potentially explosive device to send down a chimney, he also felt he needed to make sure it didn't get off the chain he was tying it to, so he welded it on. Once the welding fire touched it, it exploded and Marco was killed. That's what happens when you really don't think plans like these through. Number 2. Getting big air. For those who don't know, kite surfing is a respected endeavor in which people use kites that are like parachutes to skate across the water and sometimes get really big air. It's a complicated thing, but to those who know what they're doing, it can be quite the rush. However, the thing you must look out for is the massive wind currents, because they can literally spell your doom. And that's what happened to Adrian Monnoyer. During a particularly windy day, weather reports told surfers to stay off the oceans. But many, including Adrian, refused, and thus went kite surfing. As Adrian was doing this, he got caught up in a gale of wind that was 100 miles per hour. It was so strong that it literally lifted him up into the air and sent him inland.
Into the side of someone's house.
to which he would go and hit many buildings with his body,
Knew it.
including a massive hotel.
Yep.
And then after finally being disconnected from his kite, he would fall to his death from 50 feet up.
Yep.
This bizarre death could have easily been avoided, but it wasn't because of the thrill of the sport.
Yeah, he was doing
Number
too
one,
much.
stay in the vehicle. When you go on a safari, especially one that has various animals of incredible sizes, one of the most important rules is to not leave the vehicle at any point unless specifically told. And this is
Not even if it is to have consensual intercourse with said animals. No matter what the animals tell you, don't do them. And I learned that from the Magic School Bus. Miss Frizzle was on that other shit.
for people's safety as well as the safety of the animals. But for two elderly German tourists at a Spanish safari, they decided not to heed the many warnings that were put across the safari park and get out of the vehicle to go and enjoy the animals more. As if to prove the point, near immediately after they got out of the car, a set of tigers pounced upon them and killed them both.
Oh!
The party didn't release too much information about the couple, but it was clear that they didn't obey the rules, and it literally cost them their lives. Thanks for watching. What did you think of these incredibly dumb deaths by people who honestly could have known better?
That's kind of attractive. There you have it, YouTube. More ways to hopefully not go the way of the dinosaurs by doing dumb shit. So remember, never eat yellow snow and always wear a condom. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to comment, like, and or subscribe. It's your boy BlastphamousHD. Twisms.